Everybody, China's fury on full display. Live fire military drills rattling Taiwan is a full-blown invasion around the corner. Some are suggesting that. As we say good morning, I'm Bill Hemmer. Hello, partner. How you doing? Good morning to you.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. It's very good to see you. Amongst all this news, Bill, Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, it's infuriating Beijing, and now the Communist Party is making good on its promise to respond militarily. Watch this.
So we have gotten a lot of this video in overnight. Precision missile strikes blanketing the waters around Taiwan. The drills threatening a democratic republic that the U.S. considers to be a strong ally. Dana?
China demonstrating its ability to bombard the island by air and sea. The show of force prompting Taiwan to put its military on high alert and cancel dozens of commercial flights.
So Beijing is conducting these drills closer to Taiwan than ever before, some of them happening a mere 12 miles away. Beijing surrounding the island with helicopters and warships, showing its ability to enforce what could be an all-out blockade at some point.
Meanwhile, Republicans, they are blaming President Biden. They say his mixed messaging on Pelosi's visit gave China the green light.
He sent the wrong message like he did to Putin. Well, if you invade a little portion of it, we should be very upfront at the very beginning. Do not send a missile across. We should set a fine line of what is right and what is wrong. If the administration was strong in their messaging, China would not push this. It's all wrong handled. It's just what Gates had said about Biden for 40 years. Every foreign policy decision he's made has been wrong.
Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is following all of this from London. Greg, what do you have this morning for an update?
We have a whole bunch, Dana. Taiwan basically under fire, or at least the area around it. Just a day, yes, after Speaker Pelosi's visit there. China conducting what it calls unprecedented medium-range live fire precision missile strikes on selected targets around Taiwan. The drills, also dubbed by Beijing the largest ever in that area, are clearly in response to that Pelosi stop. China claims Taiwan as its own. Some of the 6 target zones actually overlap Taiwan's maritime borders close to its coastline. There are reports even of missiles today actually crossing over the island and through its airspace. Taiwan is on high alert. Its military is on the move. The exercises set to last 4 days include Chinese ships, planes, helicopters. Taipei calls the drills irresponsible, illegitimate, an invasion of its territorial space. Flights and shipping in the region have been disrupted. As the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier group continues to steam through the waters southeast of Taiwan, Secretary of State Blinken today is warning China against increasing what he calls aggressive military behavior. And Dana, that military behavior might be impacting others as well now. Japan says 5 Chinese missiles hit in what it calls its exclusive economic zone. That's a pretty big area, but it comes close to Taiwan, and it is a first. Again, according to Beijing, there should be at least 3 more days of this. Back to you.
Greg Palcott in London, thank you for that update.
So,
Bill?
Dana, let's bring in Tom Cotton, Republican Senator out of Arkansas. Sir, good morning to you. I want to get your reaction to what China's doing around Taiwan, but I also want to get your reaction to this. Peter Doocy at the White House yesterday.
Does he think that it was good that she went?
We cannot dictate, and we will not dictate where members of Congress go. Members of Congress, wait, let me finish.
When they go, he doesn't dictate it, they go. Now he can say if he thinks it was good or not.
I mean, that's not how it works.
That's the question about Pelosi's trip. What do you make of all this now, Senator?
Well, Bill, weakness invites aggression, and Joe Biden projected weakness last month when he dialed it up to DEFCON 1 about Nancy Pelosi's trip. I think the White House leaked this news in part to pressure Nancy Pelosi not to go. They should have acted like presidents of both parties have acted for 40 years, which is that members of Congress routinely travel to Taiwan. I've done it myself on multiple occasions. Every time we go, Beijing complains and rattles sabers about it. But then they continue to acknowledge, Beijing does that is, acknowledge that this is a long-standing custom and practice and part of our relationship with Taiwan. But Joe Biden, by dialing it up to DEFCON 1, played into Beijing's hands. Look, they are trying to move the goalpost here. They are trying to change our relationship with Taiwan. We should not allow them to do that.
Senator, do you think that there will be maybe more senators or members of the House who decide to go in the wake of Pelosi's visit?
I do, Dana. And again, it's very commonplace for members of Congress to travel to Taiwan. Taiwan is welcoming to members of Congress. They're welcoming to state officials, governors, and state legislative delegations as well. That's partly because for 40 years, it's been the typical practice that while members of the executive branch generally do not travel to Taiwan, members of Congress and state officials do travel to Taiwan. The Chinese communists know all this. They're simply trying to press an advantage because they think Joe Biden has been projecting weakness for the last 18 months. And unfortunately, they have reason to believe that.
Well, that's happening here in the U.S. We've been reporting on this real estate that's been bought up by the Chinese government, entities connected to the CCP. On camera here, I mean, here's from Arizona all the way to the state of Washington. You're proposing a bill that would prohibit this. Can you succeed?
Well, I hope so, Bill. We just introduced that legislation earlier this week. It may take some time to gain momentum, but the simple strategic facts are these. China cannot feed its own people. The United States not only can feed our own people, we can feed much of the world. We should never surrender that massive strategic advantage. We should not allow Chinese nationals to buy up American farmland or to invest in American food and agricultural companies. We should protect those critical assets for our own country. I think that's something that members of both parties can get together around. I think most Americans would agree.
I was surprised at how much they are actually buying. Call for number 3 here. The investors' holdings from 2010 was 13,000 acres, 2020, 352,000 acres. And that is a huge amount. Do you think you'll have bipartisan support on this?
I hope so, Dana. We're still working with Democrats and Republicans to try to explain the threat to them and explain what we need to do to stop it. Again, in China, you don't just get to leave the country or take your money out of the country without government permission, government oversight. It's not like America. You can't just go buy a farm in Canada. You can't get a timeshare in Mexico. The people that are coming out of China to buy farmland and food and agricultural companies are doing so because the Chinese communists want them to. This is a national security threat, and it surrenders the massive strategic advantage we have here in America, that we are the world's breadbasket, while China can't feed its own people without food imports.
Senator, just one more question on this. There are some suggesting that China could invade Taiwan within the next 18 months. Are you a believer in that possibility?
I believe that China could very well invade Taiwan. I believe they will invade Taiwan sometime in the future if the United States does not make it clear that we will not accept a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and forcible annexation into mainland China. The way we do that is to arm Taiwan now and to make it crystal clear that we will come to Taiwan's defense. That's not so we can win a war over Taiwan, it's so we can prevent a war over Taiwan.
Senator, thank you so much. Tom Cotton, a Republican from Arkansas, with us today. Thank you, our lead guest today. Dana, I think to our viewers, just a reminder here, these military drills have just begun. They will go for 3 more days. Taiwan put out an order earlier today saying we seek no escalation, but we don't stand down. And there's a big concern that they are so close to the physical geography of the island that some of these projectiles, if they're fired over Taiwan, could land on Taiwan, and that would be a major escalation, Dana.
That's right, and I think that some of the graphics that we had, that we showed to our viewers, and that Greg Palcott was explaining, when you target an economic zone, that is when there's a risk of actually people being hurt, but also it's sending a real signal that Taiwan has a lot to be concerned about, unfortunately.
We're watching it. That's right.
Also, there was this bill, a tragedy in Indiana after Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, well, she died in a car accident yesterday afternoon. The representative and 2 of her aides were killed when another vehicle reportedly traveled into their lane and hit their SUV head-on. The other driver was pronounced dead on the scene as well. Mike Tobin is live in Indiana with this update. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Dana. A veteran dropped a bouquet of flowers here at the 2nd District Field Office with a note that reads, in part, when the system routinely failed our veterans and all hope seemed lost, Jackie was always there. Indiana Republicans are shocked and sad. Not only did they lose Congresswoman Walorski, but 2 staffers as well. It was just afternoon yesterday when the Congresswoman and staffers were south of here on State Road 19. Another vehicle crossed the median and hit them head on. The other driver was killed. Zachary Potts from Indiana had risen to district director at only 27 years old. He died on the scene. Emma Thompson, 28 years old, from D.C. She worked communications. She was also killed. Now, as condolences pour in from all over the nation, Indiana Republican Chairman Kyle Hupfer said of Congresswoman Walorski, I never met a more fierce, effective fighter for what she believed in. It takes an incredible team to work and stand beside an effective elected official. There were no better examples than Zach and Emma. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stated she passionately brought the voices of her North Indiana constituents to the Congress, and she was admired by colleagues on both sides of the aisle for her personal kindness. The president stated we may have represented different parties and disagreed on many issues, but she was respected by members of both parties for her work on the House and Ways Committee on which she served.
It's one of those things that just takes the absolute air out of you.
This is going to be a really big gap to fill in her public life. But more personally, Jackie was a person of deep faith and strong conviction and just incredibly smart person.
Congresswoman Walorski is also remembered for her start as a television journalist in South Bend, Indiana, and for her missionary work in Romania. Now, protocol dictates flags be flown at half staff. As far as a replacement, that is done by special election. However, the state legislature can empower the governor, to appoint a replacement. Dana, back to you.
What a tragedy. Thank you, Mike.
12 minutes past, another Democrat says the quiet part out loud. Whoa, the party's desire to turn the page on President Biden, more apparent than ever. Karl Rove is going to explain why coming up here. Dana?
Well, the economy's engine lights are flashing. Americans are piling up credit card debt as they struggle to keep up with the high cost of living. Is this what the American dream has come to? We'll talk to money expert David Ramsey, plus this. American basketball player Brittany Griner spoke in her defense in Russia just moments ago. Griner pleading with prosecutors from behind bars to understand this was an honest mistake. Here's what she said.
My parents taught me 2 important things. 1, take ownership for your responsibilities, and 2, to work hard for everything that you have. That's why I pled guilty to my charges. I understand everything that's being said against me, the charges that are against me, and that is why I pled guilty. But I had no intent to break any Russian laws.
Nevertheless, Russian prosecutors have asked the court to convict and sentence her to 9.5 years in prison for cannabis possession. We are expecting the verdict in her trial to be read in the next hour. We will bring it to you live when it happens.
Some high drama there from Moscow. Meanwhile, back at home, the Senate votes to admit Finland and Sweden to NATO, marking a big step in expanding the world's most powerful military alliance. A clear shot at Putin on this. The 2 European countries had long been neutral, but are now firmly in the Western camp after Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Approval from all 30 NATO members is required for them to join. 22 have done so already as we watch a changing face in Europe. Dana.
Well, Democrats are still scrambling to win the support of Senator Kyrsten Sinema for their massive tax and spend bill. She's reportedly concerned about a 15% corporate book tax in the measure, and that would ultimately pass on the cost to workers and consumers. But in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, Karl Rove argues that even if the deal passes, it won't save the Democrats from a wipeout in the midterms. He joins us now. So good to have you. Just want to play call for number 1 for you, Karl. This is Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, on Special Report last night.
Calling an inflation reduction bill is rather laughable. Independent analysis indicates it actually increases inflation in the next 2 years. It's a terrible package. It appears as if they're all in line but one, and it'll be up to Senator Sinema from Arizona, who's quite independent, to determine what the final contours of the bill are.
Carl, it's no wonder that the Democrats want to pass this new revised version of Build Back Better quickly, because the longer it sits out there, the more people are picking it apart, as you did this morning in your column.
Yeah, that's right. The more we talk about it, the worse this is going to be. First of all, Senator McConnell is absolutely right. The Penn-Wharton model says that the impact on inflation reduction is negligible, indistinguishable from zero was their phrase. It increases inflation over the next 2 years and has modest impact after that. And look, they make a whole series of promises in there. One of the members, House members, Democratic House members, said, "Oh, it's going to cut down on the prices that seniors pay for drugs." Well, it has price controls in this bill that affect high-priced drugs issued through Medicare for which there is no generic substitute, and it will do so on 10 drugs in 2026. So whatever pain people are feeling today at the pump or the grocery store, this bill is going to have no impact on it. And it will not reduce prices, but it will raise your taxes. The Joint Committee on Taxation of the United States Congress says that next year, if this bill passes, families who make less than $100,000 a year will pay every bracket will pay a combined total of $5.8 billion more in taxes, and those that make less than $500,000, all the way down to those that are getting a paycheck, will pay a combined $30.8 billion. And President Biden said, "I'm never going to raise taxes on any family that makes less than $400,000. Poof, this is out the window if this bill passes, because it does. It will hurt the competitiveness of American companies. It will cost us manufacturing jobs, and it will cost us manufacturing market share around the world by making our companies less competitive."
Didn't mean to jump in there. I was just looking at some of the reporting around Kyrsten Sinema's objections. It doesn't seem in a $750 billion bill that her objections are that big. And if that's the case, I think this goes through, Carl.
Well, you know, if you start taking out some of these tax measures, the bill starts becoming, it's already hinky because it's got a lot of gimmicks in it to begin with. For example, they say we're going to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which are in place this year for 3 more years. But in reality, they want to make them permanent. They just make them 3 years, so it only costs $65 billion. The rest of the decade costs another $155 billion on top of that. So you start pulling pieces out of this, it starts to collapse. And the more we look at it, there's a great editorial today in the Wall Street Journal by the editorial board that starts to look at the special privileges that are in there for unions and specific companies and specific sectors that are largely hidden from sight. But the more you look at this nearly 800-page bill, the stinkier it gets. And so that's why the Democrats are trying to ram it through quickly. They're afraid that the longer we spend time and attention on this, the less helpful it's going to be to their electoral chances, and the more problematic it's going to be for the American people.
Well, 2022 is already weighing heavily on 2024, and I want to play this call for, I believe it's number 4. This is a New York congressional race debate, Democrats, and they're already being asked if Joe Biden should run again. Listen here.
I don't believe he's running for re-election.
Too early to say. It doesn't serve the purpose of the Democratic Party to deal with that until after the midterms.
I'm not talking about the 2022 election and 2024. I have no control over those elections.
Democratic Senator, I'm just asking you whether you would support your...
Carl, they're going to keep getting these questions. Why?
Well, they're going to keep getting these questions because ordinary Democrats have already asked themselves that question and have answered it. Think about this. The New York Times ran a poll. They said to Democrats, do you think Joe Biden should run again? 26% said yes. 74% said no. There was nobody undecided on this question. That was followed shortly thereafter by a poll by CNN. Same question. 25% said I want Joe Biden to run again, but 75% of Democrats said they don't want to. Now, In February, CNN had asked the question, and 45% of Democrats said they wanted Biden to run again. But think about that. Since February, it's dropped almost by half to only 25% of Democrats want him to run again. So the ordinary Democrats have made up their minds. It's Democrats who are in office or running for office who are in a hard place because they don't want to antagonize the White House staff or the sitting president. But the ordinary Democrats have made up their mind. They want somebody other than Joe Biden in 2024, and that's only going to grow. It's not that number is not going to that number of people who want him not to run is going to grow. The number of them who want him to run again, that number is going to continue to sink, because the longer we go on, the less impressive his performance is in office. He's too old, and then they're saying that in the verbatims on these polls.
Carl, thanks for your thoughts today. Talk
You bet.
soon. All right. Much more to cover.
Thank you, Bill.
Talk soon.
All the best.
I'm going to call you. Bye.
They're a bunch of hypocrites. They're fine with illegal immigration flooding across our borders and the crisis caused by the Biden administration, as long as it stays down in Texas.
Well, that's the Texas Governor Greg Abbott slamming the mayors of New York. Homeless man accused in a violent attack, taken down by a Good Samaritan who happened to be an MMA fighter.
Walking into me.
Bro, you still don't punch people.
Messing with the wrong cat, right? The hero martial arts expert says that he jumped into action after seeing the man sucker punch a construction worker. Listen to this.
I literally just, like, my jiu-jitsu instincts just kicked in. I jumped on his back. He tried to swing me off of him, but for those of you that don't know, seatbelt position, dragged him down to the floor, and I immediately took his back and pinned him to the ground.
And that was that, right? Rowe, an MMA fighter, kept the suspected attacker pinned to the sidewalk until the NYPD arrived, and off he went to go into jail and come back out the other door yet again.
Yeah, no kidding. Amazing story. Well, there was a tense moment for an 80-year-old liquor store owner in California caught on surveillance video. He uses his own shotgun to fend off attempted armed robbers, and now he's slamming local lawmakers who, he says, put him in that position in the first place. Matt Finn, live in Los Angeles. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Dana. Video has gone viral of that 80-year-old business owner, Craig Cope, defending his liquor store here in Southern California. Cope was being praised by the Riverside Sheriff's Office and his community for acting fast, telling Fox News he made the split-second decision, quote, not to wait, when the armed robbers stormed into his store and pointed a gun right at him. Cope fired his shotgun. Now the 80-year-old tells Fox News that incident was not the first robbery attempt at his liquor store, and Cope says politicians have created the climate for, quote, escalating crime. Cope was asked by Fox News if he would like to call out any specific politicians, and he gave this answer.
They know who they are, and I'm sure the other people that would have the ability to do something, they know who they are. But somebody needs to do something now, because we're just getting downhill faster and faster, and it's certainly a concern, not just to me, but I hear it all the time from my customer base.
Police say the 4 armed robbers are all being held on conspiracy and robbery charges. The primary suspect seen in that video was shot in the arm and is recovering. Customers of Cope's store say they're glad the 80-year-old defended himself.
Crime is kind of rampant right now, so it's exciting, actually, to see that people are actually standing up for themselves and able to have a gun and be able to fire back.
Cope says right after the traumatic armed robbery, he had a heart attack, but he says he is doing okay. Dana.
Matt Finn, that's a remarkable story. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Bill?
This is remarkable in its own right, too. American household debt going past $16 trillion through the end of June for the first time ever. Driven by an increase in auto loans, credit card balances, and most of all, mortgage borrowing for your home. Dave Ramsey's a personal finance expert, author of the book Baby Steps Millionaires. Dave, it's good to see you again. Welcome here. This is your deal. You hate debt. You've been waging war against personal debt for decades. Dave, they're not listening to you.
Well, it's tight out there. Folks are really scared, and what this is a sign of is they're reacting poorly to the situation, because here's the thing: if you don't lower your lifestyle to be within your income, even given all the inflation and even all the pressures, I mean, I filled my truck up and about passed out yesterday. You know, it's real out there. But if you don't lower your income below your outgo, it's not sustainable. I mean, you can't just add credit card debt every year and not address this situation as an individual person. You can't do that. I mean, you can't keep borrowing like you're in Congress.
Yeah. Hasn't stopped them yet, though. Dave, as you mentioned, this credit card balance has increased by $46 billion. That's the largest seen by the Fed since 1999. Americans opened 233 million new credit card accounts, the most since 2008. That means they're looking for money. There's also a report out there, but with higher gas prices, you just mentioned gas, filling up your own car, that people are putting these gas prices on their credit card, which contributes to further debt. You agree with that?
Sure. I mean, that's a scary stat if we think about it, Bill. I mean, that's the largest credit card debt increase in 23 years. So that tells us that even in the crash of 2008, when real estate prices went down, stock market went down, it was a wilder time than now. Even then, people didn't turn to their credit cards like they are now. And so that's a scary stat. And banks, folks, you got to remember out there, these banks are not your friends. When someone says, hey, I'm here to help you at 28% or 18%, that is not your friend.
Mm-hmm. This stuns me. 61% of Americans, talking about 157 million American adults, are living paycheck to paycheck. Have you seen a number that high before? And Dave, and all the advice you give and the people you talk to, how do we change that?
You know, year in and year out, we run into the number 75, 78%, 76% of Americans are living with too much month left at the end of the money. And then dump a 9.6% inflation rate on top of that. That is, a lot of it is your gas tank, but a lot of it is also the milk and the bread and the things that the gas prices and labor prices have driven up in the stores. And now you've got regular families that were probably doing okay. They maybe were not. It's pushing them up over that. And so, yeah, it's pretty scary that even with good wage increases of 5%, that doesn't keep up with a 9.6% inflation rate. Yeah, that's so right. The Biden administration's got some real issues. Mm-hmm.
Just one last thing here, Dave, and I always ask you this question. You take calls from viewers all over the country every day. What are they telling you about the inflation crunch hitting them?
I think they're most concerned about the gas prices, honestly. We're hearing that pretty regularly, and house prices. The good news is house prices are leveling off. We had a 29% increase in house prices in 2020. And in 21, we had a 18%. This year, it looks like we're going to be 7 or 8, and we're projecting in 23 only about a 3 or 4% increase in prices. Mortgage debt going way up because house prices have gone up, and people are really worried about the real estate aspect of this.
Great to get your perspective. You are the debt dude, and these numbers aren't great. Dave Ramsey, thank you. Let's speak again very soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You bet. Dana.
Well, Walmart is announcing hundreds of layoffs as part of a restructuring effort. The retailer says it expects profits to decline as U.S. shoppers cut back due to, yes, high prices. Roughly 200 corporate employees are expected to lose their jobs. Walmart is the nation's largest private employer with 1.7 million workers. So a sign of things as they are, Bill.
Yeah, that's right, Dana. Brutal crime here. Now, 2 girls gunned down more than a decade ago. Father went on the run, said to be protected by his own family in these alleged honor killings of his 2 teenage daughters. An update on that trial, plus this. Don't want to be there when that's coming down. A terrifying storm. It rained down hail the size of grapefruits where this massive barrage came down. Coming up.